Right, well, hello and welcome to another episode of Retropower Uncut, and it's been a pretty busy one. It's been a pretty hectic run. We've got a lot going on, and even more going on in the up and coming weeks. So my memory is going to have to be stretched. I've got my trusty notes just in case I forget anything, which I probably will. But we're going to start with Utah this week. We've been very busy, obviously, to state the obvious. I'll start with wiring loom. Max has been over. He brought the remaining sections of loom that we were waiting for. The front loom was already in the car, as you may remember from previous episodes. Max brought the main car loom section and the dash loom section over to check fit on a couple of areas because there were some sections of termination that he needed to finish. And he also brought the engine loom to finish terminating that as well. He's finished off some terminations on the dash area, and then Trev's been busy getting all of that routed, clipped, getting all the P-clips in place and all the everything located correctly in the car in all the places where it needs to be to avoid any chafing and rubbing, making sure that it's not going to be trapped by seats or bits of trim or anything else that it could get trapped by, making sure that we're happy with everything where everything's run. Trev's also been busy doing the coolant piping. He's got that sorted now. Other areas that we've done, it's got a gear lever now, that's now fitted, and the gear knob's fitted to that. The steering wheel, I don't know if we've mentioned that before or not, but we're doing our own steering wheel for it. We weren't really happy with any of the designs on the market. We may have touched on this before, but I'll say it again anyway. We weren't really happy with any of the designs that were sort of available off the shelf. So we decided to do our own. It's going to be machined from aluminium plate. It's a flat section wheel, so it looks period, of the same sort of flat type as the original wheel, but it will look very different to the original wheel, but also look very period. That's going to be machined from flat aluminium, flat 6082 aluminium. We're having the blank for that water jetted, and then the actual finished machining will be done CNC. Obviously the rim then needs some build on that to form the round rim of the wheel, and wood seemed a pretty sensible material. We contemplated 3D printing that in plastic, but it won't quite fit. The diameter we need won't quite fit within our 3D printers, a 400 by 400 millimeter print bed, and it won't quite fit in that space. So we decided we would get that CNC routed. So we've had that done by Coleshill Engineering. I can't actually remember the full name of his business, but a friend of Adam's has done this. Coleshill Engraving have done that for us. He's a chap that is a friend of Adam's that works for us. They've been machined on a router in birch ply, in 12 millimeter each side to get the final section, birch ply. And then the back of them has been recessed to clear the aluminium. It's also been machined to receive dowels to hold it together and to hold it to the aluminium so it can't all rotate. And it's also got slots for the aluminium spokes to recess into, so that once it's all assembled and glued together around the wheel, and then there's no way it can go anywhere, and then it'll obviously be wrapped in leather and final trimmed. So that's another step forward there. Double check my notes here. The handbrake mechanism. Trev's been working this morning actually on the handbrake mechanism because we've received some parts back from Chrome that we were waiting for. We'll cover those, a lot more about that Chrome next week. Because there are a lot more areas it's going to be fitted to on the car, but there are other things we're awaiting other things for that to be able to happen, such as the windows. I'll touch on that in a minute. Trev's been on with the handbrake, getting all that linkage reassembled because that was completely stripped down to its component parts so that we could get the various components plated. Obviously the outer lever was chrome plated, but then all the inner sections and the quadrant that it pivots on and the various other parts and the bushes and spacers and the forged arm that actually operates the cabling on the other end, all of those parts have been stripped, bead blasted, gone for plating, and then Trev's reassembled all that lever assembly this morning. So that's all now back in the car. That all needs to go in before any carpets and seats, etc. can go in. So that was, and also so we can actually get the handbrake mechanism sorted out under the car. So that's all now back in. Another little thing that's been going on is the rear of the car is having a pair of overriders on it. We're not using full bumpers. Originally, one of the ideas with the car, we were going to actually use quarter bumpers, but we decided they weren't really going to look quite right, and we changed the plan to some quite small overriders. So Carl's been having a little play with some insulation foam, which is our sort of go-to cheap material for doing trial sculpting with. He's done a little trial sculpt of those and come up with a pleasing shape. So that's he's happy with those now. So we've now just got to decide a manufacturing route for those. I believe that's in hand. I'm not actually fully au fait with where we're at with the machining of those. Cal would be able to enlighten next week on that. But certainly he's decided on a shape that we're happy with and that can carry, because that's actually going to be they're going to enclose the indicator lamps as well, which will be built into those overriders. So the design on that's all now been finalised. It's a case of getting those drawn up and getting them made. I think we're probably going to scan the foam shape, get the foam shape scanned, and then we'll get those machined. So that's where he's at with those. As another little aside that Jamie will tell me off about in a minute, because he may not have some footage of, but another thought is the door pulls as well, the door closing pulls. We've drawn those up now. Again, thinking of the foam sculpting, Carl's foam sculpted a shape that he wanted for the door pulls. We've taken some simple photos to get the outline of that. That's been drawn on CAD, and we're just, I think, possibly tomorrow going to be 3D printing the first of those in carbon reinforced plastic, so that we can get those trimmed. That's the pull closure armrest assemblies for the front doors. So yeah, there's progress there as well. And I think I've covered pretty much everything that we want to cover. Oh, there's another thing. I nearly missed it. Carl's mentioned that we were making a new brake fluid reservoir for the brake master cylinder. We decided the plastic one didn't look right. We were originally just going to use the plastic one. We realised that wasn't going to look right. So Adam's designed one on CAD. That's going to be machined by Alitech. But the spigots that then screw into that, which then allow it to push onto the master cylinder and mount. There is a retaining pin that goes through two lugs that retains it all onto the master cylinder, but there are also two spigots that screw into it, and it was quite tricky to find space in the bottom of the reservoir, in the space available, and allowing for the level sensor that goes inside the reservoir for those spigots to operate and be able to get a spanner on them to do them up. But Adam's worked out a way of doing it by slightly staggering the heights of them. He's now machined those two spigots so that they sit at the correct heights, and they'll screw into the finished reservoir once we get that from Alitech and have had it anodised. So yes, that's where we're at with Utah. It's coming together, as we've said a few times on these videos. It's starting to come together pretty rapidly now. I happen to also know, again, there might not be any footage of this, but the glass has also, we've templated the glass, and the glass is now also being made for the car. Sort of, not as we speak, but certainly over the next week, the glass should be made for the car, so that then we can start getting the window assemblies and the door top assemblies together. So that will hopefully be something to look forward to for next week or the week after, depending on how things go with the glass. You'll be able to see some nice shiny chrome parts there, so that'll be something to look forward to. Gordon's car we've been testing because the sun came out, so we've actually managed to get some miles on it. There's more to do yet. We've got some more tweaks with the power steering. We've been playing around with the assistance levels on that. We're happier than we were, so we've got to do some more test miles and just work out exactly what assistance level and range of adjustment we want that to be set to. But it's done a few miles and we're happy with how everything's going on that. So very, very close to being able to get that back to Gordon now. So I'm sure he'll be pleased, and so will we, because we want him to be able to get out and use it again now the weather's starting to brighten up a bit. So I think, moving on, we'll go through to a very, very busy fabrication shop. My head's in a bit of a whirlwind on that one at the moment, because we've got so much going on. We've taken on another fabricator who you'll meet shortly, a chap called Tom. He's started with us, and he's busy on Jensen. You'll see in a minute, but we'll go past Chevette before we get to that. Ooh, can I squeeze in here, Stu? I'm going to stand in the way of Stu for a minute. And Stu's busily working on an oil filter mount for the Chevette. That's out of the things we were going to talk about, but that's all good. Yeah, Stu's working on an oil filter mount. Scott's Scott's dropped the welding torch and it's gone onto HF and going to start electrifying everybody in a minute. It does that, it stays on high frequency when you put it down, and then anybody that approaches it ends up getting electrified. Yeah, Scott's been busy on this. The main single area of focus sort of last week, at the tail end of last week, was getting the fuel tank enclosure sorted out. He's now pretty much finished on that, apart from the top. That's having a carbon composite lid made for it, a carbon sandwich construction honeycomb lid that's going to enclose the fuel tank area. But obviously all of the rest of that area needs bulkheading off to prevent sort of fuel leakage if there was a fuel tank issue, fuel tank rupture in an accident, stop that leaking into the rest of the car. So that's all been bulkheaded off all round and enclosed. There's a section been made with some swaged holes above the axle tunnel, which blanks off that area from the rest of the car. He's then formed a stepped surround that the carbon lid drops into, and then that'll be held into there by push-release fasteners, similar to the ones that hold the boot lid shut. And that then seals off where the fuel tank and the fuel pump and the fuel filter and the fuel pipe work in there will all be then sealed from the rest of the car, as it would be on a competition vehicle. It isn't a competition car, it's just a fun road car, but that area is best to build to the same sort of MSA rules anyway. That way, if the owner does decide to compete in it, then it's suitable. Same with the roll cage. If the owner does decide to use it, it's compliant anyway. And in any case, it makes it safer for road use. So that's all done now. The brace sections of the sort of centre bulkhead, I guess you could call it, that tie the link boxes into the cross tube of the cage. The cross tube's been put in. The braces that brace the link boxes to that cross tube are now in. Some punched and swaged plates in there to tie all that area together. Scott's been doing some finish welding on various parts of the shell, welding up trim holes. There's lots of self-tapper holes. I'm just looking at in the inner sills where the original door step finishes that held the carpet edges down were fitted. We're not having carpet, so they need to go, so he's doing that. The surround for the gear lever area was drawn up and CNC cut. James drew that up, got it CNC cut, and then Scott's got that on the top of the tunnel and got that spot welded on. That's designed to have a set of threaded inserts. Well, it's got a set of threaded inserts in it, so that we can screw a billet machine section down onto there, which is going to then be the final finisher around the gear lever, and finish off the rest of the tunnel top. So that's all done. The fuel filler is now redundant because the tank will be direct fill in the boot under the removable lid. So that's now redundant. So Scott's made a section, TIG welded it in there, and panel beaten that. So that's all done. He's done a bit more panel beating on the quarter panels to get them ready for the bodywork prior to the final body kit fit. He's also done a bit of rot repair on the rear panel because there was a couple of little bits we'd not got round to doing earlier on the boot aperture lip. So he's got those bits done. I'll just check my notes a minute, make sure I've got most of the other bits. Yeah, I think we've got most of the things. Yeah, he's done the fitment for the oil cooler. Ah yes, power steering as well. We've got I don't know if I've mentioned that before or not now. For the power steering, this is having a Corsa B power steering motor and column, which we'd already done the mounts for the motor. However, where the column goes through the bulkhead, there's no outer column, if you like, where that goes through the bulkhead. It's just the rotating inner. We want to seal on that, so we've made a little. Scott's made a recessed section, like a piece of tube that's recessed into the bulkhead with a seal carrier that will bolt into it, and then that will ride on a section on the inner column that rotates in it to basically give us a watertight seal where the steering column goes through the bulkhead, just as a neat solution for doing that properly. We've used grommets and things previously. Decided we were actually going to use a proper wiper seal on this just to make it a little bit neater. It's also finished sorting out the oil cooler mounts, which they were done before, but there was a few bits to finish on those, and the sump guard mounts, because the car's having a sump guard. James has machined some threaded bosses, and Scott's got those TIG welded into the front cross member, the front chassis cross member that also carries the radiator. It's at that stage where there's all the finish welding going on. Lots of little bits and bobs around, lots of weld dressing underneath the car again. There's always, every time you think you've got it done, there's another 500 bits to weld dress, where little bits you need to grind back. So there's all that going on. And then the car's got to be seam brazed. So over the next few days, it'll be TIG brazing, stitch TIG brazing all the seams in the whole body shell. And there's a couple of gussets to put in on the cage, which have also got to be seam brazed in, so they'll be going in as well. Yeah, it's all hands to the pumps really on that, because that's basically, we're days away rather than weeks away now from that going for its final reblast, where we'll clean up all the new metal and key all that up, reblast it underneath, zinc metal spray it underneath, epoxy prime it, and it goes into the body shop to join Gary. So moving on from that, we'll move on to the CV8. Head around the corner. Last time I think we mentioned that the rear end was all done. That's finished, all the rear bulkheads in, all the structures in for the rear end, that's all mounted, that's hanging there on its mounts now, that's done. The front end, I have drawn up, I had a slight redesign, did an initial design, wasn't too happy with it, so I did a redesign. Drawn up the engine mount sections, the towers that mount the engine, the brackets that go onto the block, drawn them up, TIG welded those, welded the towers together, got them located on the chassis tubes. They're finished welded as far as we can, apart from there's a couple of bits that need the engine out to just finish off, but structurally it's all there to all intents and purposes. And then this morning, just finished off the gearbox cross member. The original one we were hoping to try and keep. As it is, it was just slightly too far forward to modify without losing too much of the strength of it. So did a redesign on that, cut all that out, which is quite a tricky job because it's fairly well integrated into the chassis, so that was all burnt out. Cut all that out with a plasma cutter, ground it all back, made a new cross member, which is like a 100mm by 60mm, I think, rolled hollow section that goes across with a recessed section for the mount to sit into, folded up, and then that's all welded into the chassis now. So engine and box are all completely mounted. So the next stage on this is, well, there are a couple of prongs of attack, but the next stage on this chassis section is going to be dealing with the bulkhead, where the HVAC unit goes into the bulkhead. We've got to do a lot of revision to that area to be able to get the ductwork in for the new vintage air HVAC unit that's got to go in there. So that's the next steps forward on that. Also on the same car, Rich, end of last week, got Friday I think, got the body sides out and finally freed off from the fiberglass. They're screwed in all around here, screwed in down here, screwed in around here, all non-captive nuts and bolts, which is a joy. But he's got all that removed and got them all popped off ready. Then we've dropped those sides out, and then they're here. This is our new man, Tom. So hello, Tom. He's our new fabricator, and his first job, dropped into the hot seat, is cracking on with rebuilding the body sides, which are pretty crusty and rotten. The worst part being the sills. The sill structure was more than archaeology, it was imagination we were having to use there really, because the sills were completely gone, there was nothing left of them. The lower section didn't exist at all, nor the holes where any of the bolts had been. So that was swept up when the car was stripped down. Ron Clay supplied us, along with the chassis, various sections to help with repairing the parts, which included the folded sections for the sills, which is handy because otherwise I would need to either build them into lengths or get somebody else to fold them in a press brake for us, because our folder is only 4 foot, we can't fold that length. So it was handy he supplied those already done, but we'd have to add all the access holes, the reinforcement pads for the lower one. We've actually just quickly drawn up on CAD and cut out some sort of lozenge-shaped reinforcer pads that go inside the lower section of that sill, just to make it a bit more secure when it's bolted down, so it can't crack around the bolts. I don't think it would, but just to make sure it won't. And then so Tom's got all that done, clamped on the top section, worked out where the holes are going to come through, punched all the holes in the top section so you've got access to the bolts that bolt those side frames down onto the chassis. And then the A-pillar's a bit damaged on this side, but not too badly rotten. There's a tiny repair he's done on that, but it's not too bad. So that's now located correctly. Everything we've got braced up. That's now located, welded to the sill. He's made 2 new inner A panels, so they're fabricated to replicate the sort of rather grotty ones that are on there at the minute. So they're going to get peeled off, but at the minute he's just working on the bottom of the actual door surround where it meets the A post. The bottom part of that had rotted quite badly. He's just folded up a new section for that and spotted all that together, cleaned up this angle bracket here is what actually locates the body side frame onto the end of the bulkhead. So that's a fairly key part of holding all the front of the car together, well, all the front of the body together. So that's all going back together. He'll get that done, get a little section welded in here that he's made up. It's on a really powerful magnet. I thought it was stuck then. It's on a magnet. You've got a section he's made up there, which will go in just under that clamp there, which will tie all of that lot together to this part, which is not rotten on there. And then once that's done, then you can drop these panels off, put the newly fabricated ones in. So that's all good. And then there's a bit more grot here, but other than that, it's not looking too bad, that. And then it's basically rinse and repeat with the other side. A bit of work on the B-post needed as well. We're going to have to pop these extra plates off here, see what the rot's like on the section where the door latch goes, on the door striker section, and see. It may go again, it may not. We don't know until we pop that off, but we'll have a look. And then, yeah, rinse and repeat on the other side, do all the same repair work on the other side. So that takes us to about where we're at on that one. Brings me on to just nestling next to us, we have new fabricator, and we also have new welder. Thanks to Matt at Stokes's Metalworking Machinery. I was considering all sorts of options when it comes to welders. We've not really got any brand allegiance. We have a huge variety of welding kit from a variety of manufacturers. I don't tend to buy cheap rubbish. We wanted decent kit, and I've got second-hand, quite expensive kit generally. I was looking around at second-hand, decent 300 amp plus 3-phase MIG welders, and there's not much around second-hand at the minute. There's a lot of complete garbage for sale, to be quite honest. So I started considering new ones, and then I remembered, I'd actually forgotten, I suddenly remembered that Matt does GYS welders, and GYS are extremely good. We've, for quite a long time, had a really small GYS inverter TIG welder, just a little handbag one, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's probably 15 or so years old now, and it's exactly the same now as it was when it was brand new. It's never missed a beat, nothing goes wrong with it, it's perfect, great to use. But you know what, GYS is probably the answer. So spoke to Matt, he sorted us out. The machine we were actually looking at was a slightly smaller machine than this, but there was no UK stock of it, and we wanted it in a bit of a hurry, so Matt sorted us out really quickly with this, got it to us basically next day. Not quite next day, it might have been 2 days, but I don't want to set him up for something he can't do. But I think it might have been the day after, it might have been 2 days from when I called him. Yeah, superb bit of kit. So there we go, another welder. I think we're going to do it. We might do a little tool time video at some point on welders, so we'll come back to that. But yeah, thank you very much to Matt at Stokes's for the great service there, and yeah, another tool to the arsenal to keep us welding in multiple stations, because we've got quite a lot going on at once now with 3 full-time fabricators in here. It's quite busy. So moving on from that through to Mustang, where Gary has made a lot of progress through the sanding stages and is actually sanding again right now. Still sanding. However, there's a lot more coating on the car now. All the epoxy is now, well, we'll rewind a little bit. The car had been epoxied. I think now had we already got the epoxy in the previous episode? I've lost track now. Yeah. Right, yeah, sorry, yeah. So we've done the external and internal, basically all over epoxy on the car has been done. I lose track of where we are from one week to another. So all the epoxy on the body shell has been done, all been cured, so that was ready for blocking. Now the Raptor undercoating has been applied on the car. It's U-Pole Raptor. I was recapping what we've talked about a few times. But on the underbody, we reblast the car at the end of Metalwork. We zinc metal spray the underbody. We epoxy coat the inside of the car. Then we do all the filler work and all the prep work elsewhere. Once we get to the end of that, the car then gets re-epoxied so that we've got a sealer coat before we do any wet blocking. That's what's now happened. The car's now sealed, being wet blocked, but that also then, at that stage, we also then put the Raptor coating over the zinc metal, over epoxy, over zinc metal spray underneath. That's now been done and lacquered, and the inside of the car is also raptored. We tend to use a black Raptor finish, depending on what the trim and what the usage of the car is, but certainly a car that's going to be fully trimmed inside as per a sort of normal production car, we U-Pole Raptor coat the entire inside of the car as well. It gives us a bit of sound deadening. It's extremely tough. It's just a generally durable coating that covers really well. We get on really well with it. It's just a really good system. So that's all been done. So basically the car's now, as far as we can determine, completely watertight, which means now all the final block work can be done to get it ready for final paint. And it's actually very, very close now to final paint. We're at the sort of detail stages now, but what is it, 800 we go to all over? Yeah, so Gaz is going to get it all now to 800 all over, wet block to 800 over all the panels, and then it'll be ready for final paint. So it's in the very final stages now. So we're looking forward to being able to move this one onto the assembly path. Yeah. And then Gary's looking forward to another quite a bit more work rolling in as we as the more sanding as a number of other cars starting to head in his direction. Certainly headed up by the Chevette. So yeah, watch this space and like and subscribe, and we shall see you next week.
Scott wants to do. He's been asked to do a little job, and bangs on you, doesn't it? Whoa! Whoa! No, you just only fell on top of it. Get away! Scott has got to do a little job at home.